Okay, hello everybody. My name is Bill Fenick. I'm Vice President of Enterprise at Interxion, a digital realty company. And I'm here today with a colleague and a customer of mine, Steve Hewson, who is CTO at Fixnetix. We'd like to thank Caroline at DCME Virtual for an invitation to talk about compute as a service. But before we kick off, Steve, would you mind giving a quick introduction for yourself, please?
Hi there. Good afternoon, Bill. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me here. Yes, Steve Hewson. I'm responsible for products and technology at Fixnetix. Been here about 5 or 6 years now, and prior to that, have spent many years in the technology, data center, and telco world. So, looking forward to talking about this hot topic on the fire today.
Very good. Thanks a lot, Steve. So compute as a service, just for people's background as well, I worked in financial services for a good 20 years. So Steve and I crossed paths quite a few times. And then Fixnetix has been a customer of Interxion for quite a few years as well. So Steve, we're going to kick off a little bit around the co-location world and financial services. That's really the lens we want to look through today. We all know that when algorithmic trading, black box trading kicked off, co-location played a very prominent role in low latency trading, particularly after the regulatory changes in 2008 in the US and the UK. What about since the 2008, if you will, since the microsecond low latency trading? What type of what type of tools do you see and services do you see customers using in the co-location environment since then?
Okay, Bill, thanks for that. I mean, I think to begin with, I'll put a little framework and context around the question because, you know, in terms of the early 2000s, when ultra low latency electronic trading really became very prominent and prevalent for us all, really that is only a small part of what we'd actually see within the trading or with the investment bank part of the world. And when I say investment bank, I mean that in the broad sense of all the members and participants within that ecosystem, whether it's an exchange, whether it's an investment bank, whether it's a hedge fund or other fintechs that provide services in that space. But the ultra low latency only is in a small space of it. Obviously, all of that space, and you know, we could spend hours in detail on this, but it is actually across a bunch of business areas and sections of business outcomes that those types of players are looking at. There's what I'd call pre-trade, which would be creating the alpha and the algorithms which are designed for trading strategies. The actual trading and the clearment of and settlement of those trades in their own right, and the ultra low latency piece being very prominent within the trading space. Management of risk, management of reporting, and also management of compliance. And I think what we've certainly seen over the last 10 years is, whilst the ultra low latency component has continued to grow steadily and also diversify across asset classes, we've actually seen a massive uptake in the desire to go to what I will call an elastic compute, what many and most people on here would call cloud. But I find the definition of cloud a little bit too broad and also subjective, depending upon your own personal view. So I'm going to refer to it as elastic compute. And the financial services, whilst being late and relatively slow movers to adopt this technology, certainly over the last few years have been gaining a lot of traction. And really what I've seen, and I think what will be a big component over the next few years, is how the adoption of elasticity within the compute fabric is taken to those business areas of creating alpha, trade, settle, manage risk, report, and comply.
Sure.
And the movement across. Now, a large degree of that heavy anchor of that slow move is really perhaps some of the profile that we get from the large monolithic providers They've done a great job in establishing elastic compute as a really good technology, but I think adoption across those different business areas really is actually going to come, that's going to grow significantly, but I think also leading through other applications that drive other business outcomes is going to need a slightly different solution, or a solution to complement the large public outsource type
yeah,
environment.
so it's interesting you're saying that, because it was leading as well to another thought of mine, or a question, is that we hear about these large cloud providers, the hyperscalers, however you want to call them, which are more or less a juggernaut. They're rolling over everything, it seems. Where do you see the relevance in, if you will, the the smaller players, be it the MSPs, be it the co-location providers, small vis-a-vis the large hyperscalers? Where do you see the relevance there, and particularly with the lens once again on financial services?
Well, I think the real relevance is going to come across accelerating that adoption of elastic typing compute, because when I worked on an operational background for many years and moved back to my roots of technology only a couple of years ago to look at how we develop the Fixnetix product set. But one of the things that obviously we were hearing from every single customer was that at the C level and board level within the major investment banks, everybody has a cloud first strategy. And to be quite honest, I actually don't think a lot of the people who take on that statement really necessarily know the intricacies and implications of that. When we talk to the individual business units who own those businesses, it's obviously all those things that make that far more difficult. Much harder to do than say becomes prevalent. And I think the aspects of, the ability to transport data quickly, efficiently, with quality, security, and also plotting a future cost profile which is secure, means that how we deploy that elastic fabric or more extensive cloud compute type solutions is really needs a different type of solution. So therefore, what I see is that within the front office, within the trading environment, there's obviously an ecosystem where stocks and shares and other asset classes are traded. That depends upon a lot of things across all of those business outcomes. And I see more of an edge type compute demand, because it's actually done at the edge, or at least the data created at the trade is created at the exchange.
So are you defining in that respect the edge as the sweet spot? I mean, you talk about cost profile and you talk about cloud first, that a lot of the C-level people are thinking about. But if we were to distill that, that's really around TCO, isn't it? So how are you defining, if you will, the sweet spot in that? Is that indeed the edge?
Well, I think the sweet spot is actually about defining hybrid solutions that covers any universal, any type of demand of that compute. And I think, again, the large institutions and any institution, whether they're small or large, has really analyzed the total cost of ownership of what we define as on-premise solutions, their own data centers, all of their own fixed assets, clearly is not the flavor of the week or month or year. And we all understand why there is a big drive away from that. But what I then do see is that at the other end, we've obviously had ultra low latency colo at the venue, been prevalent for over 2 years now. But so therefore, we've actually got two ends, we've got two bookends. We've actually got workloads from on-prem that can easily migrate to a public cloud. And they've probably already started that process in a lot of cases.
Sure.
We've got workloads that ultra low latency trading at the other end, which are in colo at venue, which are at the other end. But there's a whole plethora, the substantial amount of workloads that do need to leverage those elastic type compute technologies require a much richer and a richer set of attributes to that underlying solution other than just it's going to go into an AWS or a GCP. And those attributes are one of latency, moving your data to and from a data center in the middle of a...
When you say, when we talk about latency here, are we talking about ultra low latency or more of a deterministic latency?
Both of those, but really I'm also kind of like thinking along the lines of all those business outcomes which I spoke about. You're either moving from a 1 millisecond to a 1 microseconds business process, or you're moving from an end of day process to an intraday process, or you're moving from an end of day or a weekly process to a daily or weekly. And I think a lot of profitability and improvements in P&L will result from how the speed of those transactions can move to make the business process more efficient. So it's not now just a case of ultra low latency and determinism at the trading side. It's actually about getting hold of good quality data and processing it in a not just a low latency manner, but in a very high throughput perspective. So therefore, what I believe we're actually going to see is the adoption of new technologies, machine code learning, artificial intelligence, those kind of applications that can massively scale the analysis of data, processing it, analyzing it, managing the risk, and actually deploying it into the real world in a much faster time frame. So that might only be moving something from end of day to within minutes. And so I think the latency profile gets opened up. But to do that, it actually needs a solution which is perhaps not at the colo venue, because that's too expensive, at the exchange venue, and certainly not in the public cloud, because all of that data sat in the middle of a field in Texas, and Texas is a mighty fine state, but getting it to the point of process actually is going to cause difficulties. So I think this is the relevance for the data center world and the audience today, is that we're not just going to be a whole big bunch of farms that generate a lot of heat, that need a lot of cooling.
Essentially, one size does not fit all, is what you're...
I fundamentally I fundamentally believe that a distribution of co-location facilities that are able to host the next generation infrastructure platform and fintech services are going to be needed to be part of that ecosystem, and not necessarily at venue, but if not at venue, certainly within proximity and very much connected within that ecosystem.
Right. So we hear a lot of these buzzwords around nimbleness, that you need to be able to, time to market, move fast, fail safe, things like that. Where do you see potentially the financial services being able to leverage co-location environment to, if you will, adopt or apply these types of concepts to their initiatives, their programs? Do you see anything where you say actually in a colo environment, a financial service player can be much more nimble because X, Y, Z? Anything around that you've been thinking about?
No, absolutely. And I think that there's two aspects there, and certainly two aspects that spring to mind immediately. Firstly, in the migration of processes and procedures and aspects of the business from within a bank to outsourcing it, is one of the things that drives Fixnetix business model. One of the USPs we have, along with, by the way, with some of our competitors who play for the same target USP, is that we can build and deploy and operate much faster than typically a bank's own internal IT department can. So nimbleness from our perspective is driving a migration more to a managed service type area. And also from an elastic compute perspective, whoever builds it, whether it's a Fixnetix or whether it's a bank's own internal IT department, the whole process of building a business case, purchasing the equipment, deploying the equipment, rack, stack, connect, deploy the software, apply the test. It's a very elongated process, but the very nature of the underlying elasticity and software defined infrastructure type services means that those things now can be deployed very, very quickly. And in doing so, a bank can say, you know what, I'm going to test this strategy. I'm going to test this business idea I have. They can test it. They can test it very quickly. It can succeed, and then they double down on it, or it can fail and they can kill it. So I think the whole risk element of them doing their own business transformations is where the nimbleness is not suffocated by the potential total cost of ownership of a massive fixed asset.
That sounds very yeah. That sounds extremely sound. Here's a bit of a difficult one: forecasting, predicting the future. But if we were to fast forward 24 months, 36 months, where do we see it? We've already encapsulated the fact that it's not a one-size-fits-all. Not everything is going to go to the cloud. Not everything, of course, needs to be co-located next to the matching engine. But what type of what adoption of technology do we see out there that we think will really accelerate over the next 12 to 24 months? Be it machine learning, be it AI, or something perhaps we're not even thinking about, or at least I'm not seeing. Maybe from your customers.
I can guarantee that within 24 months there'll be at least one thing that we've not seen and unpredictable. So I think one of the key components of your question is the fact is that we just don't know.
Sure.
So therefore, within whatever plan or strategy we have, the flexibility needs to be in place to ensure that you can change direction or adopt and adapt direction as one goes. But I think what we'll see is, I think there is a massive thirst to drive more workload and business processes into the elastic environment. The constraints of that are a number of things. It's security risk, security profile, it's performance of compute, it's transportation of data. Many people in the audience will understand that the pricing from most exchanges worldwide work on a multicast type environment. These type of technologies don't necessarily operate too well natively within real time within the existing public cloud environments. So what I do foresee is a significant growth in applications, platforms, and infrastructure, which is deployed within a colo environment that's either dedicated for a bank. So it could be, for instance, tier one investment bank X comes to you, Bill, and basically says, look, I'm shutting down my premise. I've got X amounts going to the public cloud. I've got Y amount that's actually going to be in perhaps an exchange venue, which could well be in one of your data centers. But I've also got these 8 to 16 cabinets in London, New York, Tokyo, that is part of my crown jewels. So I can't put it in the public cloud somewhere, but I want it under lock and key. I want it connected within the ecosystem. I want it easily accessible for whoever as a platform provider or whoever as a fintech will provide me the software solution or the nifty application which I'm going to deploy within that environment. Because what that will do is it will satisfy the security and compliance requirements. You're going to be in a situation where you minimize the data issue because you're on net within the ecosystem. And obviously, being a tier one data center player like yourself, a tier one player, you're going to be able to satisfy those infrastructure needs whilst giving them the lowest cost of ownership and flexibility going forward. So I think we'll see a massive uptick in the movement of workloads. And what I'd actually say is a center category. I talked about on-prem migration. We've actually seen some to public cloud. We've seen some to ultra low latency at venue, but there's a middle section where I believe there will be a significant amount of private cloud environments stacked within colo data centers deployed within the ecosystem, but also a closed user group type elastic environment that is only open to the existing players and members of the exchanges today. So that then in its own right can be designed and engineered to exclude an air gap from the public internet,
Sure.
and have much stricter and tighter access controls, processes and procedures that don't exist within public cloud operators, because actually that just defeats their business model. Their business model is to be all things to all people, and this really calls for focus to
So it
deliver those
seems to me
solutions.
that you to some degree defined the sweet spot for the future. And the really exciting thing for us, or for me, is that, you know, as I mentioned, I run the enterprise with financial services under that. Financial service players seem to be, in many respects now, the first movers on this. So quite a few of the other enterprises will be adopting, it looks like, this type of pattern or behavior in the future. So this is a really exciting time for us. Steve, that was highly informative. That was really actually very interesting. You know, thanks a lot for
Pleasure, Bill.
with us and talking through some of these things.
Pleasure.
Really interesting. Thanks a lot. And once
Thank you for having me.
again, invitation. Thank you.
Cheers.
Okay.